The updated Sony 24-70 G Master version 2 is the best mid-range zoom that you can get for Sony E-mount full-frame systems. But it comes with one really big problem that's going to make it a no-go for a lot of people. But before I get ahead of myself, let's kick things off with a short video to show you what this lens is capable of, and you can decide for yourself whether the image quality is up to your standards. When we come back, we'll talk about what's new, features and functions, pros and cons of the lens, my experience shooting both video and photo, and of course we'll get to that big problem. In the meantime, please enjoy the video. The following video was shot entirely on the Sony a7 IV with the Sony 24-70 f2.8 G Master version 2. The incredible music that you just heard in that sequence was a song called Bedrock by a band called Long Lake, and I got it from the sponsor of this video, MusicBed. We all know just how important music is for any video project, and getting high quality and authentic music is a huge part of that. We want real artists making real music with real emotion. That's what's gonna make your project stand out, whether it be documentaries, short films, commercials, or YouTube videos. MusicBed has an amazingly curated curated roster of over 1,000 authentic and relevant artists like Josh Sahunta or Tianda that I personally know from my time in the music industry, or artists like Makeup and Vanity Set who just had 8 of their songs featured in season 4 of Stranger Things. Because MusicBed uses something called a rights managed model, you get access to better quality music and your license actually goes to properly supporting the artist's work. So if you're ready to take your films to the next level, head down to the link in the description. You can sign up for a free account, check out all the music, and then when you're ready to dive in, use the code DUNNA to get a free month when you purchase an annual subscription. And of course, a huge thank you to MusicBed for sponsoring this video. Now that you've seen what this lens is capable of, let's break things down a little bit. The most noticeable thing right away, like so many newer Sony lenses, is that this thing is significantly smaller and lighter than its older counterpart. It's about 1.6 centimeters or 2/3 of an inch or so shorter than the previous version. Even though we've got the same 82mm filter thread, we've got a smaller diameter for most of the lens, and it's about 200 grams lighter than the older version. And potentially more important than any of that, this lens is smaller and lighter than the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 that was my previous favorite in this category. If you want to see a more kind of detailed video comparing this lens with that one, make sure to let me know down in the comments. But beyond just size and weight, as far as physical features and functions go, we've definitely got some updates there too. We've got some custom buttons on this lens, as well as the typical manual focus autofocus toggle switch, but they've also added an aperture ring to this lens. You've got the ability to set it to clicked or declicked if you want to have those smooth aperture changes. And you've got an iris lock that will allow you to lock it in either the mode that is controlled by the body or in the mode that's controlled by the lens itself. This doesn't actually lock the aperture from changing, it just decides which mode you're in. And then we have one of my favorite new additions to this lens, which is a toggle switch that allows you to change the resistance of the zoom ring. So you can set it to smooth if you want it to be easier to move, or you can set it to tight if you want it to be harder to move. Basically for me, this replaces a zoom lock function. On other lenses that have a zoom lock switch, I have this tendency to turn it on when I'm not using it, and then I'll go to grab it and I'll need to zoom really quickly, and I'll get really confused because why isn't the zoom working? And then of course I realize I have to take the camera away from my eye, I turn off the lock, I can zoom it out, and by that time I've kind of missed the shot. I know this is silly user error, but it's still something that's frustrated me many times. The Sigma 24-70 actually had a cool function where it's kind of a soft lock. You can lock it in the widest position, and then when you go to push the zoom ring, you can kind of push through the lock, so you don't have to actually use the lock toggle switch. But with this lens, if I set it into tight mode, it's not gonna move on its own, but when I go to grab it, I can still move it with just a little bit of extra force. The advantage here is that I can basically lock it at any focal length, not just the widest one. And while it does take a little bit of elbow grease to get the zoom ring moving in tight mode, I found it completely usable. Even though I can turn it off, I've had it on basically the whole time, and I haven't missed any shots because of it. Being a G Master lens, this is Sony's flagship lineup, so we've got weather sealing as well as all the materials feel great. It's robust and solid, and the materials and textures that they've used for the zoom, focus, and aperture ring make for comfortable usage. Speaking of the focus ring, we've now got linear manual focus on this lens, which is great if you're trying to do any kind of manual focus pulls or if you're using any kind of motorized focus pulling equipment. We do definitely still have some focus breathing on this lens. It's not anything too crazy though, but I'd like to just take this moment to remind Sony that a lot of us are still waiting and hoping for focus breathing compensation to come to cameras that are technically higher in the list than the A7 IV, which is the only camera that has it right now. Please, Sony, please. As for autofocus, this lens has the newest XD linear motors, which are definitely a step up. Not that the previous version had any problem with autofocus, but this one is fast, it's accurate, and the one thing that I really noticed about it is how smooth the autofocus transitions are. I found myself just using the touchscreen to do focus pulls from foreground to background, and I loved how smooth the transitions were. For image quality, I had high hopes and also some limited expectations. This is a top-of-the-line G Master lens, so I definitely expect it to perform well, but it's also a zoom lens, so there are some limitations when compared to prime lenses. The overall color quality, contrast, and general look are fantastic. It's definitely got some wow factor going on. The sharpness is actually really impressive both at 24mm and 70mm. Wide open at f2.8, it's sharp in the center and barely has any fall off in the corners. I did notice I was getting some color fringing, but I didn't find this to be a big deal for me, and it definitely didn't outweigh the positive aspects of the image quality, but it's definitely there if you look for it. And the bokeh is really pleasing on this lens. There's a nice smooth transition between in and out of focus areas. And it's starting to rain, so I think maybe we should finish this inside. So with all that, this lens, in my opinion and experience, is the best performing mid-range zoom that you can get for Sony E-mount right now. So the question is, what is that big problem that I was talking about at the start? And you may have already guessed it. It's the price. Currently, this lens is going for $2,300 US or 3,000 Canadian, and that is just a lot of money, especially considering the other options available in this category. We've got the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 that's $1,100 US or 1,550 Canadian. There's a Sigma 28-70 f2.8 that's $900 US or 1,250 Canadian. And then there's a Tamron 28-75 f2.8 that's also $900 US or 1,250 Canadian. And all of those alternatives are solid lenses too. It's not like we're comparing the cream of the crop to a bunch of cheap garbage. So the big question here is, should you buy this lens? This is always the hardest part of any of these review videos, is making a recommendation, because everybody has different needs, different situations, different bank accounts. But here's a couple of things to consider if you're trying to make a decision about this lens. First, I personally prefer a 24-70 over a 28-70 or 28-75. I find that those extra few millimeters at the wide end actually make a bigger difference than you'd expect. But if you think you've already got that wide range covered, maybe with a 16-35 or something, then it's totally your call. The second thing to consider is that the new size and weight of this lens are much nicer than the Sigma 24-70 that I previously was suggesting in this category. I definitely noticed the difference when taking this one with me instead of the Sigma. And finally, the image quality, sharpness, and handling experience of this lens are, in my opinion, the best of the bunch, but you really need to factor that against the price being literally double that of the competition. You are getting better quality images with this lens, but not doubling the image quality. And you are getting a better handling and build quality experience, but you're not getting a doubling in improvement. Unfortunately, this is how these kinds of things go. As you try and squeeze more and more high performance out of a product, it starts to cost a lot more money to make smaller improvements. It's the law of diminishing returns as expressed through a mid-range zoom lens. If you're looking to do some more research or maybe pick one of these lenses up, links to all the lenses that I mentioned in this video are down in the description. And as always, I want to hear from you. Are you the kind of person who absolutely needs to have the best quality option, or would you pick the options that are still good but a little easier on the wallet? Leave a comment down below, and on your way down there, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.